Greetings, Michael. Ernest Kitces. How are
Hello,
you?
David Carl Richards III.
That's right.
I got
That's
that
right.
right? DC,
Yeah.
DCR
Yeah,
3.
you know what? Somebody at one of the FPA chapter meetings I was recently at came up and said, "Hi, David Carver is the third." And I was like, "Wow, that's proper." You know what I mean? Like at least somebody follows
That's
instructions. There's one
proper.
person
So like everybody else who just sends Carl, says, hey, Carl is like overly
improper.
casual now.
Yeah, I
We got
mean,
a little
look,
too
don't I look
casual.
like somebody who we cares about proper manners? Of course, like of course. You know what we should talk about? I'm super curious about this idea of knowing the difference between an investment and an expense, both like the
An
personal level, and I kind of
investment,
want to,
an
and an
investment is
expense.
like I save for my investments and I spend money for my expenses.
Yeah, and I want to like push the envelope of like both from the business, like when is something no longer an expense and has become an investment, and personally, like what's something that you spent money on personally that's turned out to be an investment.
So is that your question outright? Like what's something you spent
That's my
money
that's
on that?
that's my that's my question. It's intentionally a little vague.
I like so I may have to think about it a little bit more. My gut answer still actually feels like I don't know, an investment thing for many. Like just when I hear that, my first thought is I spent a crap ton of money on my education, on like
Mm.
continuing my education, right? Just the alphabet soup of stuff. I know it's
Yeah,
an alphabet soup. I'm not oblivious.
yeah, I know
Uh
you aren't.
like it's that alphabet soup that for me I did after college while working. You know, I had the very good fortune to grow up in a household where like my parents were able to save for me to get through college. So I did not graduate with any student loans at the end of college. But the deal was basically like, we get you through college and then your life is your own and
Right.
you're on your own. It's like we will birth you out of undergrad debt free, but you're gonna have to figure out your future after that. So uh and I was very interested in continuing to learn and sort of invest into myself that way. And so, you know, CFP classes, master's degrees, all the various designations, most of them I figured out a way to get at least some partial support from work, but I never even had a job where they paid the whole thing and it was covered. Like my most of those at best were like they would pay a third of it or they would pay half of it with me,
Wow.
for me, tied to me. So, you know, that was even then, because now I'll date myself a little, that was 20 plus years ago. Like that was many, many thousands of dollars every year that I was spending on programs. It was over 10 when I was doing the grad school work
Wow.
that I was spending every year. Because to me, like it was just I wasn't spending the money on school. Like I was investing the money in myself, in my career, in like my ability to do more and be better as an advisor, and then ultimately like to be able to get more clients or get raises and promotions at the job because I was employee for some of that time period. Uh like to me, just that end of all things education related
Hmm.
was always those were always investments. Those were never uh
Hmm.
that was never spending for me, even though in practice what it meant was I
Hmm.
drastically dialed back how much I was putting in retirement accounts in my 20s because I
Hmm.
was spending a lot of my free cash flow on school.
Right. Yeah, I mean, even from, yeah, that's a great example. And the reason I'm curious about this is not only like how we think about our own money as financial advisors, planners, real professionals, like whatever we call ourselves,
Advisors, but that's fine.
how we think about it from the business perspective that we're running, and also how we talk with clients about it. Because like the way I think, like an expense is something that I generally want, if possible, I want to eliminate. right? Like if
An
possible,
expense is something I want to eliminate because
if possible,
if possible, because I just even my gut thought around it feels very different. I don't know. An expense to me is something necessary. Like the
that's fine. Yeah, that's fine.
necessity
Yeah.
is the first word that comes to mind to me, which is ironic because that essentially means like my frame of expense are the things that can't be eliminated.
Yeah, no, that's
Expense, like I'm stuck with that. I gotta do that.
yeah, but if you have a choice to lower it by $10, your cable bill, you're going to do it if you can get the same, the same package. I'm going to lower my cable bill,
Yes. Well, yes, at some point my efficiency
right?
brain like kicks in.
Of course.
Got
Like,
to
is it worth the
economize.
time to? Yeah, totally. But for instance, human capital. Like if I know that by bringing someone on, or maybe we just go down the Dan Sullivan route, right? Like I'm going to only do what's my unique ability, and I'm going to outsource everything else. Not even outsource, but I'm going to get somebody else to do, whether that's outsourced or inside the team. I'm going to get somebody else to do all the other things. That can feel like, whoa, that's really expensive. I can't afford that. I'm really curious about the moment when it switches in our heads to I can't afford not to do that. And why do some of us make that switch and some of us don't? Like why do some people, I'll give you like a crazy example. I, through a series of events, which it's not really useful for the conversation, but we ended up when we were living in New Zealand. Well, a little bit of the story is helpful. When we were living in New Zealand, my wife had a climbing accident. It was really scary. I happened to be in a speaking tour in India when it happened. So I got this weird call at 4 a.m. when I was in Varanasi, and like all this, it was like really weird, like a really weird nightmare / dream of my son saying, "Hey, mom's been in this accident." So I make my whole way home. I'm really shortcutting it because if I don't, I'll cry. I get home. Corey needs a bunch of physical therapy. We go to I can't remember the doc. I think the doctor told us like, "Hey, there's this guy named Glenn. He trains 4 of the current All Blacks, which is kind of like New Zealand training LeBron James here. You know what I mean? Like it's kind of a big deal. He won't be able to train you long term, but he might be able to. I doubt he'll accept you as clients long term, but he'll be able to point in the right direction." We go meet with Glenn. My wife is so lovely and so fun, and she talks her way in. So Glenn says, "Hey, I just had people cancel. I'll take you on as clients." So we went to Glenn every week that we were in town for like 2.5, maybe 3 years while we were there. And at one point, after like 6 months, I was like, wow, this is expensive. So it wasn't cheap to go every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 3 times a week, every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And but my wife was like, hey, I don't know if you've noticed, but not only are you feeling a lot better, you're like getting a lot more done at work. So I was like, wow. And Ramit Sethi, who everybody has feelings about Ramit. But Ramit talks a lot about this too. Like, is having somebody clean the house or do the laundry or the dry cleaning delivered or paying for the help from Glenn, is that an investment or an expense? And why do one person could see it one way and another person sees it a different way?
I will admit, I do a lot of that spending as well, and very much view it as it comes from an investment frame for me of freeing up my time to do stuff that drives more impact, either drives more impact to the business or just lets me spend more time with my kids. Because if I'm not working in the business, that's pretty much the only other thing that I want to do with my time. So yeah, like the lawn gets mowed by other people, all the maintenance of the house happens by other people. I mean, I joke sometimes like I can do internal revenue code sections off the top of my head. I have no idea how my plumbing or any of my appliances work.
Right.
I could figure it out. I'm a reasonably sharp guy, but like I spend no time on it. I just throw some money at it and make the problem go away because I'd just rather have my time focused on work or focused on my kids
Was
because
that
that's
hard for you?
really
Do
all.
you remember when you made that trend, like when you've decided to pay somebody to do a thing that you used to do?
It it hasn't been hard for me.
There's no like puritanical like work ethic problem.
No, because I know I'm still going to be working. I'm just going to be doing other things. Taking
Right?
time off, I've got other like
That's
puritanical
okay. You got other problems.
syndromes to
Okay.
deal with.
So it's
But
purely just a wage arbitrage thing in your head.
yes, like that end of stuff at least is a wage arbitrage for me that I've gotten very comfortable with because I'm good at doing math on wage arbitrages. So for better or worse, like that end has not been challenging for me. Just it came from once I found that I could grow the business more when I actually freed up my time and attention more to do it, which is a thing you got to get to. Like for some of us, all the discussion, like, well, you should hire a team to free up more of your time to go grow the business. That for some of us deep down, there's a nagging thing of like, but I don't know if I can make it that much bigger.
Right. Or
To
I don't know how
actually
to
like
do
create
that.
that
Yeah.
outcome, or like to create enough of an outcome to offset the cost of making
Yeah.
this investment, or at least like I'm really not certain it can do it, which is basically an expression of like my risk tolerance to make this investment into my business or myself or my time to free up my
Yeah.
time. For better or worse, like I found enough success in, well, I say this, like I found enough success to be able to do that I got very comfortable with that wage arbitrage. But to be fair, as I reflect back on that, like that basically came in my 30s, not my 20s. So
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
after 10 years, 10
Yeah.
years, 36,000 days, dot, dot, dot. Oh, and then like the wage arbitrage thing got easier. But that's only because for the first 10 years, the spending was into myself and into my career and into my education in the first place. It was like a decade of spend money on education things, add letters, that a decade of, okay, go do things with the letters and free up your time to do those things.
Yeah.
Oversimplify
Yeah.
life in a little
Totally.
bit.
And I want to get back to like the amazing financial advisors that listen to this and how you see this show up in decisions they're making in terms of how to run the business. And there's no right or wrong in this question at all. I think this thing lives in constant tension that will never be resolved. But let me ask you one more question that I'm curious about. I'm just trying to push the edge of this. There's a really well-known author that we all know and recognize, and I've known him forever. And he, early on, when he first started getting speaking requests, he asked for some help around how to like arrange the speaking requests. And I was walking him through the idea that you typically include business class travel. So it's the speaking fee plus business class travel and accommodations is pretty typical. And so when you get on a plane, you're typically going to sit in the business section of the plane. He's very uncomfortable with that idea. And he particularly, I remember saying to me, well, if that's the standard, can't I just, and this is actually is done in the speaking industry, you can just say, instead of business class travel and accommodations, you just say speaking fee plus X.
Yeah, like flat
As a voucher, like a flat thing. And
flat dollar amount, and then I'll go figure out my plane tickets however I'm going.
Yeah, and so he would do that and then sit by the cheapest ticket, and he was always like, yeah, that's like 4 of those a year fund my kids' education accounts. Fast forward 4 years, and
I just hear that, I'm like, or just raise your speaking fee by another $1,000, my friend.
If he fast forward like 4 years and he's 100%, he's like, hey, what did he say to me? If it's not seat A2, I'm not going. So there's an example of like, oh, and the story you can tell yourself is, there actually is a difference. Sorry, there is a difference. Whether it's worth paying for is a completely different discussion, completely. But the story that you tell yourself is, I arrive. The reason people are willing to pay for business class travel for a speaker is they are in their head saying, well, they'll arrive ready to speak, right? Like it helps them be prepared to speak. Do you see that as an investment or an expense?
Oh God. Well, if I really need it to be effective to speak, like it's an investment to me. I mean, in practice, because I've navigated this from the speaker world, like
Yeah.
I don't require business class travel domestically, because like I'm fine in coach. It's not that long on the plane. I'll be fine. When I travel internationally, I require them to buy business class. I'm like, if you need me to travel over an ocean for 18 hours and be functional the next day, I like need a seat that I can actually like lie flat and sleep on, or I'm going to be a train wreck when I'm supposed to be good on the stage for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Fascinating. Yeah. I only brought that up because I'm watching that progression that my speaker friend. So where do you see, and I'm curious, maybe I'm trying to be really careful here about not being right or wrong, but where do you see mistakes made in terms of the way advisors think about this for their own businesses?
For
This
their
investment
own
versus, investment versus expense, this idea of investment versus expense. Where do you see mistakes made?
I mean, I cross a lot of domains. I mean, I think there's a whole giant list of, I'll just call them like those wage arbitrage kinds of scenarios, right? It's everything from hire and let go of tasks that you don't really need to. I mean, there's some of that in the business. We call that traditional like delegation, right? Like hire an administrative assistant to delegate some things. It gets harder for most of us when you get into, home, family, personal tasks. I remember a fascinating discussion with years ago with Cheryl Holland of Abacus Planning Group down in South Carolina. So like fascinating. I think they're like $1 billion or few dollars that they've grown to. Wonderful team, incredibly successful firm. And she had talked about like the challenge that she's growing this very successful firm and hiring all these people and driving this growth for her household. But she still had very traditional household roles at home, which meant as the wife, a lot of things fell to her. And she was like, I don't have the time to do. And so she said, like, one of the hardest things she ever did was, as she puts it, this is her words, not mine. She said, I hired a wife for myself. I hired a wife to do the things that kept coming to me as the wife because my husband just wasn't doing them or taking them, I guess. And so she didn't want to create marital strife, but she needed to power the business forward. She was like, I had to get over the fact that like I just needed to hire a wife for myself who was like cooking and dry cleaning pickup and whatever stuff. I forget all the details that she had on the list. But the thing that stuck with me about it is that was a really hard thing to do because it wasn't in the business domain, right? It was in the personal domain where all sorts of other dynamics, family dynamics, spousal dynamics, upbringing, what we were raised in, role models we've had, how we're supposed to function in a household unit. Like there's a whole bunch of other stuff that comes in for that, right? I think, getting back to the earlier conversation, like I felt a version of that myself, and I just basically had to make the conscious decision of I'm just basically going to be an ignorant homeowner. I'm not going to know how anything in my house works and is fixed. I'm going to throw money at that to have someone else do it. I mean, throw money at it. I try to be responsible in who we're hiring, but it's like I'm going to pay whatever they make me pay. Because I don't want to spend my time on it because I think my time's better spent elsewhere.
Yes, there's two really important things I want to just comment on. I have this friend, Jason, who makes a ton of money and is a really high-powered, like incredibly valuable per hour person, and still changes his own oil of all the cars. And I was having this conversation. I was like, well, and he's like, I like it. Like I don't.
It's fine if you like it. I also don't.
He's like, I don't actually like it, but I like like I gotta do it. Like I like that whole feeling. I was like, that's really fascinating. So he's really self-aware about it. He's like, I like the feeling of doing something that I don't love to do. Totally fine, right? So that's why I'm careful about right or wrong, good or bad. And then my wife Corey and I had this exact conversation. We were like, we said we needed to hire a husband. We were like, we need to hire a husband because like Carl, you're clearly not getting this done. So I understand that one too. Here's another one that's interesting to me. I think financial planning is a huge chunk of, at least the way some of us do it, it's not the right or wrong way, is creative. There's an element of it, like looking somebody in the eyes, in the face of irreducible uncertainty, telling them, helping people make decisions with incomplete information like that. So to me, it's becoming increasingly important. Like an hour or two outside is work. Like it looks like I'm riding my bike to anyone else who sees me, or hiking or surfing with Scott Frank, or, you know, like it looks like I'm doing, or skiing. It's work. It's like a required part of my functioning work. That one's been hard for me to get over too. And I think increasingly when you shift from manual labor, quote unquote, time and effort, to results and creativity. And you pointed at something earlier too, like lumpy income, like the business is worth more. Well, that business, you don't know that right this second, right? Like it's not worth more in the form of cash in your pocket. It's worth more in the form of equity. So there's all sorts of weird things in here about like, is this an investment or is this an expense? Is this walk I'm going on right now an expense of time? Or do I find myself being 10 times more productive because I did it? Gosh, that's hard to sort out. You know what I mean? And I talk to advisors all the time. We're like, in fact, Jeremy Walter, I told him I'd throw him under the bus for this, and he was fine with it. Like for a while, he would hide about taking Friday off. I remember I texted him.
He was like taking Friday off, but he wouldn't tell anyone.
Yeah, he even said like, I've been secretly, and I was like, secretly why? He's like, I don't want anybody to think I'm a slacker. Well, it turns out taking Friday off wasn't an expense. Taking Friday off was not only an investment in the business for the other 4 days, it was also an investment in the family and the home and like all those other things that come into play. So I think this idea of thinking really holistically about investment versus expense, if I find an investment that I know that if I throw $1 at it, it will produce $2 or even $1.25, I want as much of that as I can.
Well, I agree. I think most of us being wired that way, it's just sort of like, I mean, the planner, goal-oriented, achieve, maximize, optimize mentality. Like, I don't feel like that's the hard part for us. It's the, if I hire the team member to delegate some stuff and I free up my time, can I actually really grow the business enough to make this work? Like, okay, I love the metaphysical statement of, taking Fridays off as an investment in the other 4 days to be more productive. It's like, but okay, but do I really believe deep down I could be more and more productive enough to not just drown in my work trying to get 5 days a week work done in 4 days? Like,
totally.
There's all
sorts of tension.
I don't find the challenge is literally making the investment for most of us. It's our confidence and conviction that the payoff will actually come.
There's a guy who wrote, let me stumble around just for a second while I see if I can get the name this fast, but it was a book. Oh, it was Tony Schwartz. That's what it was. And Tony Schwartz talked about how for intellectual work, thought work, 90 minutes is the outward edge at a time without a break. And that typically 3 90-minute blocks is about all you can do in a day. And he read that research somewhere, and then so he took that research and said, my next book, that's how I'm going to write it. And I'm totally paraphrasing, and I'm going to try to be careful. I'm notorious for exaggerating. And so I'm trying to be careful here, but he talked about how much faster and how much better the book was because he took he wasn't in the office pretending to work for 8 to 12 hours.
Right.
He did the 90 minutes, took a break, like walked outside for 15, came back, did the 90 minutes, took lunch, came back, did 90 minutes, went home. The book got done faster. The book was better. Like, I can't remember how much fast, but it was dramatic.
Yeah.
And so I am always sort of like thinking about the way we use time, and the way we use money, as, because my definition of real financial planning is aligning your use of capital, and capital to me is time, money, energy, and attention. So there's always an asterisk next to capital: time, money, energy, and attention, with aligning your use of capital with what's important to you. And like, from a work perspective, it's like, okay, influence, the number one thing that's important to me is like impact. Can we have an impact on people? And you only get permission to have an impact if you profit equals permission to have impact. So of course, profit's important too. So I want to align my use of time, money, energy, and attention into the things that have the highest impact, and allow me permission to keep doing those. And sometimes that's a walk. And sometimes that's an extra team member. And sometimes that's Monday, Wednesday, Friday with Glenn. And sometimes that's business class. And sometimes it's changing my own oil to go the opposite direction. You know, like, it's just so interesting that it's not a static answer for all of us. And that, to me, the answer to this whole conversation is, well, why don't you just start paying a little more attention?
I was going to say, like, so what's the rubric? What's the framework to figure out what the thing is? I'm struck even as what you're saying, and then you went right there, that it kind of takes a little bit of introspection to say, like, what would move the needle for you, right? Is it hiring another person to delegate to? Is it outsourcing your wife or husband's household tasks, as we've talked about? Is it education? Is it more walks? Is it Fridays off because that makes Monday through Thursday more impactful and productive? Like, you know, what is it for you? Which I sort of asked rhetorically, but literally, like, for people listening, like, what is it for you, and what's holding you back from the thing? Because the other thing I find when I have like some of those conversations is, I know, like, I'm spitballing numbers, but like, half of us don't know what the thing is, and the other half of us know darn well what the thing is. There's just some reason why I can't ...
Yeah.
Right. Cheryl's was like, but I'm the wife. Like, I have to do the wife things. I was like, but then I realized I don't, like, not those things. There's other things she does. She's still happily married, as far as I know. But but like,
Jeremy's was, he didn't want people to think he was a slacker.
Yeah.
I think,
again, I'll look from my end. Like, my big summer job for years was mowing lawns. That was how I made my money and savings. I've got a lot of my first money memories are tied to what I did with lawn mowing money. So, like, saying I'm not going to mow the lawn and pay someone else took me a while to get to, especially because it's been a lot of years since I was doing that. So, like, 30 years of inflation on the cost to mow a lawn, it gave me a mild freak out moment. So I was like, wow, that's what that costs now. Like, holy cow. But like, I need to let go of that. There's other things I need to do and I want to do with my time.
Totally. I worked on this project for a while that at some point it's going to see the light of day again, called the spending practice. And it was this idea of, rather than being like bad or good, it was just purely like, look, I spent time, money, energy, and attention on that thing. Like, whatever. It's easy to do money, but time's even more crazy. You want to have a crazy time, like, go look at your screen time on your phone. So I spent that much time on that. No shame or blame. So this is answering the question, like, how do you figure it out? I think you figure it out by practicing, and you practice by noticing. So I spent time or money on that thing. And here's a super quick story so we can wrap up. But my friend Rob had a buddy that he used to take to lunch every month. And Rob went through the spending practice. And I wrote a little thing that I used to hand out. And Rob went through the spending practice, and he noticed this expense every month. And we sat down and like, tell me about that expense. No shame or blame. He's like, oh, that's a buddy of mine. He's having a hard time. This is one of the only times he gets to connect with anybody. So we were like, oh, what are you investing in? Like, what are you investing in? What's the value? That's what it was. What's the value that's being expressed in that spending? Well, to him, it was friendship and support.
Yeah.
Oh, super interesting. So we wrote in that column, friendship or support. And then Rob took the next step, which was, is there another way to express that value in the same relationship? Sometimes the answer is no. Friendship and support's enough of an answer. But he's like, you know what? We both love to hike, and we both work on a trail. Like our office building backs up to a trail. So they started just hiking once a month. And he's like, bonus, I increased my the amount that goes to my Vanguard S&P 500 fund by $50 a month because of that. So now he's like, now I'm investing in another value called future freedom and a value called friendship, and it didn't cost me anything to do. I think that you can do the similar thing, like go through the spending practice yourself and just start paying attention to, like, I notice Jim Collins used to do this. He had a little book he'd carry around called The Bug Called Jim. That's what he'd write on the front, The Bug Called Jim. And he would just notice, like, I noticed the bug does a little better when he spends 10 minutes outside before each phone call. Like that, like he was just.
So he's like writing himself like he's an experimental.
It's exactly right. It was really, really cool. I think he's like, I noticed the bug gets angry faster when he's hungry. So like, I think you just start noticing, like, wow. I know I do a heck of a lot better. I've only recently discovered that I do a heck of a lot better when I have more protein in the morning. Interesting. Well, good high quality protein is actually not an expense anymore. Normally, like when I look at the grocery bill, I'm like, we got to reduce that. That's an expense. Now I'm like, oh no, I'm really glad we're spending that extra money because the good high quality protein makes me more productive. So anyway, that's an example. Just pay attention and notice.
All right. I like that. I like that theme. Thank you, Carl.
Cheers, Michael. See ya.
See ya.